What is up, everybody? Happy Thursday. Thanks for joining us here in the Cell Liberty Lounge. I am so excited to be joined by a very good friend of mine. I've known for, well over a decade now. She is a self-described foul-mouthed Southern belle, badass defense attorney. I love her more than she could ever understand. Guys, welcome in Natalie McCown. How are you tonight, Natalie?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
Thanks so much.
I feel very
tell everybody about you, who you are, where you're from, background, all that sort of good stuff.
As you can probably tell by listening to me, I'm from the South. I'm from Alabama, from a tiny little town called Sulligent. I practice law right now in Florence, Alabama, which is close to Huntsville, Nashville. Do a lot of criminal law. It's really my passion. And I'm just up here late at the office trying to make you happy and make me happy.
Trying to make it happen. What a cool defense attorney office, right? Well, we got a lot to talk about. So let's get right into it and let's talk some shop. Yes. All right. So Kyle Rittenhouse. I'm gonna be honest, when I asked you to come on, I thought we were gonna have all kinds of verdict stuff to talk, but it's kind of stuck in limbo right now. The word on the street is that there are two jurors that are worried about the outcome and how it might affect their city, and, for example, potentially more rioting, more violence, more property damage. First, can you tell us how on earth that information gets out of a jury room? Because I was shocked for you to tell me this.
Well, I don't know what their courtroom is like. I don't know where they're deliberating at. But I was wondering the same thing. How could we have gotten that information? Because, jury deliberations are between the jurors. That's where they're at in this room. And it's supposed to be them deliberating, no outside interference. So what will typically happen is if, during the decide the verdict, defense attorneys, prosecutors will sit out in the courtroom and they'll try to just kind of listen to see if we can hear what's going on in the jury's deliberations. And sometimes you can hear them laughing. You can only tell the overall demeanor of the room, what's going on. And sometimes you can actually hear what they're saying. And I've actually had a case where I had one holdout juror who was like, I'm not convinced. I'm not going to vote guilty or not guilty. I don't want to even get into it. And so he held everybody out, and I was able to hear that in the courtroom. I could tell who it was, which juror it was, and I was able to discern, okay, we've got one holdout, and it's because she just didn't convince, but she doesn't know what to do, but she's not going to go on ahead and convict. So a lot of times it's from the actual courtroom, listening to the jury and they're deliberating. You can sometimes hear what's going on inadvertently while you're really not supposed to be listening, but if you hear it, you hear it. You can't unring that bell.
Yeah, and you would think, like, sometimes in higher profile cases they change the location, but this is still kind of small town Wisconsin, so I guess that is entirely possible. Mm-hmm. What, as a defense attorney, is going through your mind while jury is deliberating?
Well, if we've got a couple people that aren't that are holding out, it's good at this point, because they're not able to reach a verdict. So right. And I think in my mind I'd be thinking, well, we're looking at probably a hung jury. If I if it's me, that's what I'm thinking, because it doesn't sound like there's enough to convict or acquit, whichever way they're leaning. I don't know.
Right.
In my opinion, there's certainly not enough to convict him,
right.
Which would tell me if there's not enough to convict him, then we all should want to acquit. But, that's not how regular lay minds work. So, how to have a unanimous decision either way, I would be leaning towards it's probably going to go mistrial.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people believe it's going to go mistrial as well. Have you ever come across or heard stories of something similar to this, where there's potentially a jury holdout because they know what they want to vote, but they're potentially concerned about public opinion and backlash?
No, I've never personally seen this, but I think that in every case that you're involved with, whether it's, in our small town here in Florence, you get a hold of it, you're going to have to deal with a trial by the media. essentially,
Yeah.
in the public, what they're saying. And that's its own, little weird area where you got to deal with that. So I think here it's different because they're worried about, okay, our outcome of this particular trial, what we decide could affect our entire city. I have never personally had to deal with anything with that sort of repercussions, but I can see how that would be in their minds of like, how am I going to deal with this on the outside? What am I going to, after we reach the decision, what am I going to do?
Yeah, the closest thing I could think of would be almost like the Rodney King prosecutions, or even last year with Derek Chauvin. But those juries were able to reach a verdict, in those. I would be curious. Potentially, it's that the media is on the side of. I don't know. Maybe it's that the media's got. I think in Derek Chauvin, it was a pretty clear cut case that he screwed up and he did wrong and he committed murder basically. But I think in this case, the media and potentially the public opinion are a little different. That not everybody is like on this one side of things. And in this case, the media wants to get Kyle Rittenhouse, whereas the evidence really shows something contrary. Whereas in the Chauvin case, I guess it was pretty, yeah, he's guilty, obviously, and here's that. But it's a weird place where trial by media has got us escalated to the point where we're making guilty or innocent decisions on, like, how is the public going to perceive it? What can you do your job if the public is swaying you in that way as a defense attorney?
I mean, I think you have to come up with creative ways to deal with that, and having press conferences and doing things that may not be limited by a gag order or what have you. You're going to have to find a way to help the public perception on your client if you're having to deal with a media presence or a trial by media. And I mean, I am watching this. I haven't followed the news in probably 2 years because I just hate it. It's bad news all the time, and it's always polarized. So I just stopped watching it. So when you told me about this going on, I was like, yeah, I need to get caught up. And heck, I mean, I know it would be hard to try to go on each polar opposite end of the spectrum and deal with each news media organization on, your client and how they need to, perceive him.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost impossible because it's almost like the news media made up their mind before the trial on what it was. There are clips out there of them calling him a blatant white supremacist, saying he showed up with a gun to shoot people, and then nothing seems to back that up. We got a question I'm going to drop in from Holden Wright. He says a legal analyst from former Milwaukee County ADA / current defense attorney Jane Christopherson seems to think the prosecution made some huge mistakes, including rights violations, at the very least grounds for appeal if there's a conviction. Thoughts?
I mean, I think there's multiple grounds for, in an appeal. If it doesn't go his way, the defendant's way, there are several things that happened that violated his rights, in my opinion, that are certainly arguable that they violated his rights. Whether or not he could even really have a fair trial with the media, right? I mean, that's a huge deal. What we were just talking about. The jury feeling pressure from the outside about what to do has no bearing on whether legally this guy is guilty or he's innocent. But that's getting into their minds. And so there's a question for me. Has he gotten a fair trial? I mean, has that right been violated? Because we can't have one we have this outside influence affecting the juror's decision. And if that comes out that somehow they can prove that coming out of a juror's mouth that they're worried about what's going on the outside, so they weren't going to make a decision, that's one thing. Another thing that's been violated, in my opinion, the fucking prosecutor, in his opening statement, making reference to the defendant being silent. That is that's like, no, you don't do that. That's baby kindergarten lawyer. If you're going to be working in a trial, a courtroom, that. The fact that this dumbass doesn't know that is unsettling. Like, I can't even tell you how unsettling it is to me. I don't know how they done then. How would a mistrial been at that moment?
Right, referencing that, there is we've got a video we could play of the judge yelling at him. I couldn't find the specific point where he did this, but basically, when you are arrested, the first thing the police officer has to tell you, you have a right to remain silent. If you go to be questioned by the police, the first thing you can say is, "I'd like to speak to an attorney," and then you don't have to talk ever again. You don't have to talk to police. You don't have to answer anybody's questions. You don't have to do any of that stuff. That is your legal right. So for the prosecution to use it as evidence in some way or infer from that he was guilty is like day one stuff. So the question a lot of people had when it came to that, Natalie, was, is that ignorance or was it intentional? Knowing you don't have a case and you can maybe save some face with a mistrial. Is a mistrial a tie where you walk away and you go, especially if you got a shit case like this one?
Well, that's what I don't understand is, okay, I don't know whether this was an intentional act by him or not. I would hope that it was not an intentional act by him to mention this to produce a mistrial for a couple of reasons. One, he's an officer of the court. We're supposed to go into that courtroom and do the best of my abilities to do my job, to get whatever outcome I've got to get for my client, him being the state. What he has to do, everything he can ethically do to get a conviction. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if he wants to go in there and blow it up, it's wasting a lot of people's taxpayer dollars. It's inflamed an entire city. I mean, there's no telling the repercussions of just this prosecution even occurring. I don't understand why, if it was a shitty case to begin with, why didn't they present it to a grand jury? Because prosecutors, at least in Alabama, if you present a case to a grand jury as a prosecutor, the defense doesn't get to be there. It's totally secretive. Mm-hmm. So they can sway that evidence in the grand jury, like when they're in there telling the grand jury, hey, these are the facts, this is what happened. They can, at that point, put it in a way where they can pretty much get it kicked if they want to, because nobody's there to police it. So if it was such a shitty case, if I'm the prosecutor, I'm going to try to go in there and tell the grand jury, here's what happened, but I'm going to try to sway them to say, yeah, there's not enough for even to try to even get them charged. So I don't understand why they're going the route they're going with it. If he is doing that, it's wasteful on the taxpayers. And I mean, the whole city's in arms about it.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the reason that the prosecution didn't do that is because they knew this was a huge thing when it happened. It was a huge story. Mainstream media covered it. It was wild for a couple months. So almost the prosecution almost felt like, even though the court of public opinion forced this trial, essentially, does that have to go with, like, because you're right. I think if he put this in front of a grand jury, even as well as he swayed his facts, there's going to be at least one or two who go, you don't have a case here, dude. Like, the public outlash, that repercussion, those riots potentially from not going to trial could have happened. So maybe he's trying to kick the can down the road, and I don't know. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
If he's going to kick the can, we still have to pick. We have to address the can at some point in time. So if he's trying to get it thrown out for a mistrial now, is it because he has a shitty jury? Like he doesn't think that the jury that they've picked is going to be on his side, or is it just, I just don't like this case? I don't know. I would hope that he wouldn't do that. I think he's so fucking stupid that I don't think it's a tactical thing. I don't believe this guy is bright enough to force a mistrial. I think he's just that ignorant.
Okay. I trust your word on that. I wasn't able to watch it all, but yeah, that's let's talk about what the trial. Well, let's play this video real quick. And this is where the judge really kind of lays into the prosecution. And
which one?
Yeah. The big one. Let's watch.
Jeremy.
Can't hear.
I can't hear it. I know what this is, though. This is whenever you
Right.
start talking about some 404B stuff that the judge has already made a motion in limine order on a
Right.
motion filed to exclude certain conduct to show action and conformity. And this prosecutor deliberately came, and there had already been a judge's order. We're not going to talk about this particular conduct because it could prejudice the defendant. It's more prejudicial than probative in value. And so judge had already ordered that, and this prosecutor comes out and says, I don't give a shit. I'm going to go on and I'm going to talk about it right here in front of the jury, and you cannot unring that bell once you put that in front of the jury. And he knows that. I mean, so granted, now he may not know that. I don't know, but either way, well, I know that there's a reason that judge admonished him like he did, because this is, I mean, like the second time that I tell at this point in time in the trial that he fucked up majorly. It's a major fuck up.
And this is where the defense is saying he's either aiming for a mistrial or he's just stupid. So I put on the CCs, so maybe you can follow along exactly with what the judge says.
Cool. Yes.
So
I mean, the judge is pretty much like this. He's like, look, I want to fucking cuss you out right now, but I know that every camera is pointed up here. This is going to be on national TV, and I'm already making you look like such a dumbass. I'm just going to leave it at this. I can't fucking believe what you just did. Like, it is like it's unexcusable. I mean, it's the second time he's fucked up. Like what I just told you, he'd already fucked up about, even acknowledging or talking about the Fifth Amendment, the silence thing. And then he's fucking up and he's bringing up some prior, bullshit that's not admissible under 404B. And the judge has already said, you can't do that.
Yeah. So what is 404B? Explain that for us plebs.
Okay, let me try to put this in a way. So let's just say you're charged with a crime. Let's say, Jeremy, you're charged with murder. Okay. And there's a certain way that you created. You did this. You shot somebody in the head. And so you broke in their house. Well, let's just say you had a prior conviction of murder, and it was the same kind of facts. All right. The judge would have to decide whether or not we could talk about the prior act. The prior bad act is 404B. Okay. Whether it's conduct that would show, hey, because he did it this one time, this bad act one time, maybe that can bear on whether he did it now. The court says, no, we're not going to use past acts or prior bad acts that have nothing to do, that are too attenuated from this particular charge to actually prove that he's a bad person. It's more prejudicial, meaning it hurts the defendant more to bring up that bad act than it does to help the jury decide whether to convict him or not. Okay. So if it's more prejudicial than probative, it doesn't come in. And typically in a case like this, courts will err on the side of caution on 404B. They're typically not going to let a prior bad act come in unless it meets certain, certain requirements where it could come in. Like, let's just say he had a charge, you had a prior charge of where you actually shot somebody in the head breaking in. Exact same type of modus operandi, right? You have an MO that's the same. If that's going on, then sometimes the judge, if there's an issue of like whether you're saying, hey, I wasn't even there, I don't know anything about this, I didn't kill this person. If you ask your theory, then sometimes the judge will say, well, we've got a prior charge where the same sort of facts are involved, where you did the same sort of thing. So, yeah, we'll let that come in. That 404B typically wouldn't come in, but if it makes an exception, it will. Does that make sense?
Okay. That does make sense. That does make a lot of sense. So what was it exactly that he brought up previously in that wasn't necessarily approved? And he mentions the door was open, but he said, for me, not you.
I don't think it was an actual like criminal charge. I think it was some kind of conduct that the defendant had engaged in at some point in time prior to this particular event occurring. And I could be wrong, but if my memory serves me correctly, I believe it had something to do with him talking about shooting someone and maybe pointing a weapon at somebody prior. And and I think the prosecutors trying to make an argument of intent. Okay, like, well, clearly his intent was to go do this because he'd already talked about doing it. However, the judge, they took that up on pretrial motions where the defense attorney filed likely a motion in limine to say, look, we've got these bad acts that they've alleged and complained or some of the discovery that we've been provided. And we're asking you going ahead and determine before we go to trial that these certain things cannot come in under 404B. And so that's what the judge did. He decided at that point, this certain conduct, I'm going to say, does not come in. And no. Now, what you would do in that case, if you're the prosecutor, if you wanted to bring that up, what you would do is have a little go to the bench with the defense attorney and say, look, at this point, after hearing what you've heard, Judge, is that still going to be excluded? Don't just bring it up in front of the jury without going and talking to the judge and the defense attorney first. I mean, and anybody that's been practiced in trial work would know that.
Yeah, because he knows what he's doing. It's like you said earlier, once the jury hears it, they can't unring that bell. So that's an advantage that the prosecution has and can use to their advantage, and he gets yelled at. Yeah, that's okay. But, people don't convict on. Yeah, it does.
Violates his rights. It does. There's so many things that there's going to be an appeal on, in my opinion, if it goes for the prosecution. If the verdict comes in the prosecution's favor, the amount of claims for an appeal is just astronomical.
We believe, obviously, the overwhelming belief is that there's going to be a mistrial here. What happens in that case of a mistrial? There's with prejudice and without prejudice. Can you explain the difference for the people?
So yes, well, what with prejudice means is like, let's just say it gets dismissed with prejudice. The judge takes it out of the DA's hand because he did mention something about the video. I don't know if you remember, if you heard this or not, but when he was allowing this particular video to come in where they'd enhanced the quality of it, but it hadn't been provided to the defense prior to trial, he said, look, I'm going to let it come in. But this could be a house of cards. If this comes down later that something's quirky with this and something smells rotten in Denmark, then this could fall apart real quick and I will have no beef dismissing this with prejudice. Okay. And so with prejudice means it cannot be tried again. Okay. If the judge were to take it out of the prosecutor's hands, it couldn't be tried again. Now that could potentially be appealed by the prosecution, but that's what with prejudice means. You can't be tried for it again. If it's a mistrial without prejudice, they would bring the charges again. We'd have a whole nother trial, which typically is what happens when you have a hung jury.
Okay. Holden wanted to bring up that video specifically, that it was compressed. I sent you the clip last night of the two. It seems like they just cropped a Fox News video. In your opinion, what is that going to be? That's a violation of discovery, says Holden. What do you think is going to be the outcome here?
Well, granted, I don't know what they're going to do. I wish I had a magic ball and I could tell you, but
right.
I mean, if you are charged with a crime, you're entitled to all the evidence that could exculpate you from the crime that says, hey, you might not be guilty of this. Anything that the prosecution has, they have to turn it over to you, right? And so before trial, you're supposed to get everything as the defendant. Here, what they did was they gave the defendant the shittier version of the video. And I don't know if it's because if there was actually some tactical advantage they thought they would gain by that. Hey, this video, you can't really tell what's going on in the grainy video. But then when we go to trial, it's got this new one on you where maybe you're not going to have as much time to go through and be like, well, look at this particular area. We're going to highlight this good fact for the defendant. You're not going to have time to do that in real time when I just pop it up there on the screen. But you've already been produced this video. It's just not in this good quality where you can actually tell what the fuck's going on. So, I mean, I think, it's a big deal that they didn't get the clear version, especially if they hired somebody to go in and clear it up. They have a right to know who's done it, what their qualifications are, whether they're trained to do that, whether they're, reliable. They couldn't even do that because they didn't even know about it. They couldn't cross-examine that guy with the shit.
I was going to say, defense has a right to cross-examine that individual too, right?
Right. Yeah. So, they didn't have time to even prepare to look at it and even highlight any good facts that come out of that video if they were there for the defense.
Right. Let's play this video of the fun little piece of the prosecutor's closing statement. Let me get us back in it. Boom. All right, here he is with his damn water bottle.
Why does he have that water bottle like that? Jesus Christ. And by the way, this is just a misstatement of law right here. That's bullshit.
Okay, let's expound upon that, because this one not only was it crazy that this motherfucker is pointing an AR-15 at the at the jury in the galley. He then goes on to blatantly misquote law. That when you show up here, let me let the video finish playing his little statement here, because I think he's not done saying stupid shit.
No, he's not. He's talking.
Okay. If you are the one threatening others, you lose the right to self-defense.
No, you don't lose the right to self-defense. Now, it may not be as good of a claim, okay? Mm-hmm. But you don't lose the right to self-defense. That is a mischaracterization of the law. Surprised that the defense attorney didn't object to the misstatement of the law, because that's confusing to the jury. I mean, imagine being a juror and the judge reads you the law in this case, and you've got the prosecutor granted, the prosecutor's gonna have no credibility with me if I'm a juror, because he's already told me shit at the beginning that didn't pan out to be true at the end. But, he's telling me something that's different than what the judge is telling me the law is. So that's confusing to a juror in itself. What is the law? We go to law school for 3 years and then we have to take a bar. And it's still hard sometimes for lawyers to determine what law to give to the jury for them to decide, hey, whether someone's guilty or not. So I can imagine that this was extremely confusing for the jurors whenever they hear this and then trying to actually put that together with if they're listening to them. I don't know if they're still even listening to this fucking prosecutor or not. But if they are, put that together with what the judge is instructing you on the law after they're done with closings. I mean, and the guy pointing the gun, why would you even do that? Granted, I could tell that he wasn't loaded. I mean, he had the little safety. Which tells me, yes, maybe he's not dumb. This stupid asshole, if I'm a juror, if I'm anybody in that courtroom, I don't think he's got enough sense to operate a weapon. I've been up. If he had done that with me being in there, I was like, well, I'm going to fire away in here. We'll all be blown to bits. So I don't know. There's so many thoughts in my head with him. I can't hardly even process them.
Well, let's get off of him for a minute and let's talk about judges. One of the things that I believe is going to happen in this case, and Holden brings it up here, is that there's going to be a lot of backlash against this judge. There already has been. They believe he's one-sided because of said political positions or whatever. But actually, this judge, apparently he was appointed by a Democrat back in '83. It's considered, completely politically unbiased. I know that's not the case with all judges. Jesus Christ, we put Roy Moore in a seat, in a big seat here in the state of Alabama, and he's clearly not an unbiased individual. How often do you see or do other defense attorneys run into cases where a judge's political lens really affects the way and the outcome trials happen?
Well, it's unfortunate, but judges are people too. Okay. And I mean, I will say with this caveat, because I have to practice here where I'm at, we have good judges that don't do this. Okay. But I can see how it goes. Right. We're not talking about you where I work, other judges. When you're dealing with an elected official, okay, which is part of the problem, in my opinion, electing a judge based on a party, okay, which most of the judges that I know have to run on a party ticket, at least in Alabama, they do, if they're running for certain types of judicial roles. That's going to set them up to be leaning towards one way or the other, which is exactly what judges are not supposed to do. They're the gatekeepers of facts. They're there to determine law, and it's supposed to be just law, not politics. What is the law, black and white? It's my decision, right? Well, when you have a political party that you're affiliated with, you're already coming off as maybe not starting out equal. Maybe one end is going to get a little bit of an advantage. And it's human nature for judges to lean one way or the other. But you have to know how to control yourself in the courtroom to where it's not blatantly obvious. Here, with him being a Democratic, I guess he was
appointed by a Democrat.
With him being, it doesn't really seem to me that would go with where we are right now in politics. It seems like the Democrats are wanting a conviction when we have the more,
right-wing Republican.
There you go. The right-wing people are saying, no. So it's like it's the opposite of what you would think it would be if he were politically affiliated. But it does happen all the time, and I can see how it's easy for that to come into your mind to have that go on when you have to associate with a party. But I don't know.
Yeah, this brings this up, Holden, again, but this was one of the wilder things I heard. The judge forgot to silence his phone, and a song Trump used during his campaign played as a ringtone. Now, hold up. Can I tell you what that song was? It was God Bless the USA by Lee Greenwood.
Yeah, and see how things get played, and see how things can be misconstrued so easily.
Right.
It may be factually correct, but we're going to spin this in a way to where it looks like he's going one way. That's it.
Right. Are cameras in the courtroom a net positive or net negative in this way? That it can be, sides can spin it based on things that they see happen and don't fully understand? Or is transparency what should win the day?
Well, I think in an ideal world, transparency should win the day. I mean, because, yes, while if we just allowed members of the media to go there, or people that were in that area to go, whoever could fit in that courtroom, you're not going to have a way to say, well, they're telling me X, Y, Z, but I wasn't able to see it, right? Well, here we can actually, if you have enough sense and you give a shit enough, you can go watch the trial like I did. I was like, I'm not going to watch anything related to like the news or the media. I'm watching the trial. And so here, I think that gives the public an avenue, if they take advantage of it, to make up their own minds without having to listen to what's going on in the media. So if the media tells us what just happened, hey, one of Trump's songs played. Well, okay, what was it? There you go. I mean, we can't have that.
God bless the USA, right?
I mean, you can fact that, check that yourself.
Yeah. So you're right, but
public ain't gonna do that. Though.
They're not gonna do it, right?
Where they just like, oh, well, here's some clickbait. I'm just gonna read what this says, and I ain't gonna even look into it. That's what's discouraging to me, is that we have these, these tools we could use to keep things transparent. But they're just too stupid to even Look into it.
But people, they're not stupid.
They're just lazy.
People aren't. Well, they're just not interested in the truth. They're interested in winning.
Yeah.
They're interested in in eliminating and defeating their political opponent. They're not interested in honest truth and objective truth, and that, I think, is a much scarier fact. Okay, let's talk about what we talked about, because I thought it was really fascinating what you mentioned and what was happening in this case. One of the things that I've always heard district attorneys, prosecutors really love to do is they'll stack charges. And there are all these laws on the books that have like silly, sort of things with them. So rather than, if they can't get you on the murder one or whatever, they'll stack on these 10 other random charges that could play and get a conviction out of it. Let's talk about what you've seen, not directly, but heard through the grapevine, of prosecutors doing, why they stack charges, what allows them to stack charges, and how they use it to their sort of advantage against your client.
Okay, stacking charges. I mean, just imagine you're a juror and you have a defendant that's charged with 20 different criminal acts, right? That looks a lot worse than just having one crime, right? There's more to consider and more things to evaluate whether this guy's, done some shitty stuff. It just makes them look worse off the get. And the reason they can do this is because it's so easy to get someone charged with something. Probable cause is hardly nothing. That's all it takes to get someone charged with something. Here I could indict. With what you do, you get probable cause to indict someone. I could indict this Coke can. I mean, it's not hard to do. And so the way they're able to do that is just by getting an indictment, which is, is there probable cause to charge this person with this? Probably so. Most of the time there will be. And so when they stack those charges, it's prejudicial, makes the defendant look worse than they are probably. And it makes it seem like they're more likely, again, bringing up 404B stuff, because they've been charged with all this stuff, they probably did something wrong. You'd be amazed at how many jurors believe that. Well, they wouldn't be sitting here right now if they hadn't done something wrong. They wouldn't have all those charges if they hadn't done something wrong. And that is what I think, tactical advantage of prosecutors trying to get you charged, like stacking on those charges. Now, what we were talking about earlier is I have never in my lifetime seen where a prosecutor asked for the judge to read instructions to the jury on a lesser included charge than what's been charged. So typically who asks for that to be done is the defense attorney, because we're like, well, we don't want something less that he can be found guilty of than murder, manslaughter, or whatever have you. Anything that could, it's been proven in court that they could potentially find them guilty of, would ask for an instruction on that lesser included for the jury to decide. I've never seen a prosecutor say, we want the lesser included on there. And I think here the reason that he asked for lesser included is because he knew his case was shit. It went terribly for him, in my opinion, in court, and he knew it was shit. And he's like, we got to get him on something, or I'm like a dumbass. If he gets acquitted on everything and he walks on everything and there's not one thing we can stick and make him look bad on, I'm going to look like a dumbass. So let's get the lesser included instructed. I've never seen that happen.
So to explain that, what's happening there, and I'll just put this in layman's terms for really stupid people who failed out of Samford and didn't graduate with a law degree like me. Basically what it means is that when they stack charges, they start with the top, but then they have all of these other charges. But a lesser charge is going from murder 1 to murder 2 to manslaughter to those sorts of degrees, right? Mm-hmm. And so in this case, the prosecution, who is trying to get murder, 1 or 2, whatever, I don't know what they're going for, to stick, is having instruction read to the jury what manslaughter and these lesser charges than murder are. And that, as you said, is kind of an interesting thing that typically the defense does, because jury can go in there and go, no, he's not guilty of murder. He's guilty of manslaughter. But in this case,
we can kind of reach a middle ground on that. The jury may say that, but they're not wanting to convict him of murder. I think that's probably why he's doing it. He knows that he can't prove the highest charges. He knows he couldn't. He didn't meet his burden. He didn't. I mean, in my opinion, he didn't.
Yeah. I tend to agree. Well, that's been that's really interesting, fascinating. Anything else you saw from this trial that really was like, holy shit, this is a great example of what might be imperfect in our justice system and how that impacts people that you defend on a daily basis?
I mean, honestly, it was so overwhelming when I watched it, the amount of stuff that I thought was ridiculous that came in and the things that they talked about. The prosecutor, mostly the prosecutor, talked about that. I thought it's just trampling on the defendant's rights. Yeah, there's so many things. I can't even tell you and articulate right now one off the top of my head because I'm swimming in them. Like, it's just, there's so many things that I saw. I mean, and really a big one that I've just considered since we've started this was, the media's involvement. And another thing, if you think, like we even talked about this MSNBC, I don't know whether that has been, even, I don't know whether that's true or not, whether a particular alleged reporter was following this the jury bus. I don't know if he was just there or he or she was just there in the general vicinity. I don't know what happened, but think about this too. Imagine being a juror and you think that you've got somebody from the media that's going to know where you're at, where you're deliberating at, and we've got this unrest in town. Like, your decision is certainly going to be, that's going to factor in your decision, and it should not. It should not come in between deciding guilt and, and an acquittal. That is not something they should have to consider, and I don't think it's anything that, is going to go anywhere good for the defendant, especially. Like, what they decide, well, if we make this decision, then they're going to come get us. They certainly feel threatened, and I've never seen that happen in my life, where an actual juror feels like whatever decision we make, we could face potential violence, and that, I think that violates his rights to a fair trial as well.
Yeah, but it's where we're at, and it's a scary thing. So that being said, I would love to hear, I've got sort of one final question, and I would love to hear your final thoughts on it. So okay, so we have a group in our audience that really believes in individual rights and protecting those rights. We believe that the state is kind of looking to take those rights away. I would love if you could give sort of a lesson, a 101 in, you are interacting with the police and it could be about another, they could be claiming that somebody else committed a crime and they're questioning you, or you've come up into a situation where you might need defense. As a defense attorney, tell the people out there, here's what you do when you're faced potentially with being charged with a crime. Well, I'm sure you've heard of these two gentlemen who are the pot attorneys. You've probably seen their videos, and I 100% agree with them. Shut the fuck up Friday should be an everyday thing, okay? Do not talk to them. Now, I understand it's going to look like, you're going to feel like I look guilty if I don't talk to them. They're going to advise you, like the Miranda, what we talked about earlier. You have the right to remain silent and all that good stuff. Tell them you want an attorney. You're not going to answer any questions without your attorney there. I think that is number one thing you want to do. Because once you do that, they can't keep coming back and harassing you once you've invoked that right to an attorney. For that particular charge, they cannot keep coming back and harassing you about it. So I think, one, don't talk to them, because you can easily see how words can be misconstrued, just like what we talked about a minute ago with the Trump song. That can be turned and twisted around, and prosecutors will do that with your words as a defendant. Anything you say, they will hold them against you, whether it's bad or not. They will find a way to make it appear bad. So don't talk to the police. Do not talk to them at all unless you have an attorney first present with you. That is the biggest one. I mean, I don't care if you're sitting in jail. Tell them you want an attorney. Exactly. Shut the fuck up Friday. What are your rights if the police say, okay, if you don't want to talk, you're going to need to come in? Do you need to, like, if they say, we just want you to come down for questioning, do you have to come down for questioning? No, you don't. You do not have to do that. I mean, they can make you once they get enough probable cause to charge you. If you want, right. Correct. And so a lot of times, like I've seen this before where they have
several different people they think could they be in the police. They think could potentially be the defendant in a crime, right? And they may talk to several different people. And, you might have one of them that says, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I'm going to come present and I'm going to talk to y'all though, right? And they present and they talk. Well, just think if they hadn't done that, there probably isn't going to be anything to hold against them later because it's probably he said, she said. If you've got another defendant that goes down there and says, I want my attorney, it looks bad. I grant you that. But there's nothing that they're going to be able to do. And what I would do if I was charged or I was potentially being charged, all right, I don't really want to talk. They want to keep talking to you. Am I being charged with something? Am I being charged with something? If the answer is no, then you should be able to leave. And if you can't leave, then that's a detention that they have to advise you of all your rights. And so I think first and foremost, be respectful to the police officers. I understand you're doing a job. I get that, police officers, but my rights are my rights, and I would like my lawyer. I'd like an attorney present. I think that's the first thing you do. Now, if you get in a situation where you're already there and you're talking, and they want to keep talking to you, and you feel like I can't leave, I presented on my own free volition, but now I feel as if I can't leave. Ask them, am I being charged with something? Am I free to leave? And if the answer is you're being charged with something, then yeah, you're probably going to jail. But if not, you're going to be able to go.
Yeah. And in that moment, if you're not being charged with something, obviously, well, then I need to speak to my attorney. But the key is the cops are not talking to you to help you. Like you are always a suspect. You are always on the line. They are never talking to you to clear the air or clear things up. They have an intention, and that intention is to find evidence, and your words can be used against you. So, I think that's good advice. Shut the fuck up. Ask for a lawyer. It's that simple. So, with that being said, I hope things really do go well, and we have some sort of a peaceful solution when it comes to the Rittenhouse trial. But any final thoughts? Anything else you want to add for the people?
I mean, shut the fuck up Friday, and I hope I hope shit does not hit the fan whenever they do end up indefinitely reaching a verdict. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. We got a lot of talking to one another to do. Some beers and bonfires and getting off social media, I think, can make a huge difference. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for being a part. It has been a pleasure, and I hope to see you very soon.
I agree. I've enjoyed it, and I better see you and that kid soon.
Love you, kid. See ya.